So next up in our group of images is Andrew's work. He again was working with Buffalo Niagara River Keeper, and I guess your images are not numbered here, so we'll just take them in the order that they were submitted here and assume that's the order that you intended for them. So neat image. I love the fact that you've gotten down low in the photograph, so you're almost at water level. So the viewer very much is experiencing the water in a very close-up and intimate way. Love the inclusion of the geese, having the waterfowl in there, bringing the scene again to life. I have to say, the more I look at this image, boy, I'm kind of fascinated by, it looks like a drainage pipe there in the background, something like that. And I almost wonder if there's a way to incorporate that a little bit stronger in the frame. Maybe juxtapose one of these geese in front of that. I don't know how closely they swam to it or not, but certainly that element of it is very interesting for me and begins to tell a story about what's happening to the waterways and certainly speaks to the river keeper's mission of preserving and keeping safe our waterways. So next image, some litter on the banks of the river, or I'm sorry, on the banks of the lake here, whatever spot it is. I like the fact that it's in color. I think it sort of has a very murky look to it that feels kind of icky and toxic. I do feel like this exposure is a little bit bright for my tastes. I think I'd probably darken this up a little bit, especially sort of in this area. It looks a really bright and washed out. I think the water, I like the fact that we can kind of see through the water to that floating moss or ickiness. But I think if we darken this image up a little bit, I think it definitely becomes a little bit stronger. But really like sort of this pattern that the leaves and the sediment and just all that ick makes, and then you're breaking up that pattern with the discarded refuse, bottles and cans and so forth in there. So kind of interesting, and this might point to an issue that I have with this project, and it's one that I kind of unfortunately had with Kayla's also, or I'm sorry, Kaylee's project, which was of similar things. This spot in Delaware Park is just, it's really obvious and really common. And so when you have something that's pretty obvious and pretty common, I think you need to photograph it in a way that's not typical. It's not in a way that, just the average ordinary bypasser would photograph this. So maybe for me that means putting my camera on a tripod and having a long exposure here. So maybe some of this water goes soft. Maybe it's taking this at a different time of day when the lighting is a little bit more dramatic. This kind of feels like, midday where, the sky's kind of washed out. It's not very interesting. It's not very unique. And, quite honestly, I think the photograph becomes more about this graffiti than it does about the waterway in the background. So I'm going to stress to everybody to just really try and take images that are not common and not obvious. I just feel like this is the image that if we gave anybody a camera and told them to, walk in Delaware Park starting from this spot, this would be the first photograph they'd take. So just really try to take a a creative approach to things, different vantage points, different shutter settings, different angles, whatever you can do to break that sort of eye level, common, everyday, ordinary view is really going to help your work in the long run. Again, my eye really doesn't have anywhere to land in this photograph. I guess it kind of works its way through the water here. There's some stuff that's breaking up the water there, but gosh, it's so far in the distance, it you really can't tell what it is. And then as I go deeper into the frame, yeah, there's some people there, so I kind of get the connection between humans and the waterway. Your frame is also really tilted to the left. It almost looks like the water's draining out of the frame to the left. So I certainly would crop this image so that the horizon was level rather than tilting. But I think, again, you gotta include more in your images than just the water. You've got to begin to tell a story about this waterway and what makes this waterway significant. Why do I need to preserve this specific piece of waterway? So, a nice shot of the dog. I get that the dog's probably either picking up some tennis balls that were left around here, or the dog is just a participant in the waterway here. In either case, I'm not sure how it relates entirely to the story. I do think that perhaps if you back off a little bit and include some of the shadow of the dog, the photograph becomes that much more interesting. But other than having the water in the background incidentally, I'm not really sure where you're going with this shot. And again, very similar image, almost like you're taking all your images from the same vantage point or from the same spot. You're not much farther past that sign again. So, you got to mix it up. You got to give us some visual variety in your work to keep the viewer interested, to keep them, wanting to continue looking through the images to find something new and find something different. In fact, I wonder, almost, is that the same dog from the previous image? It almost feels like, all these images were kind of like taken in the same spot around the same time, which, again, sort of begins to become monotonous rather than, new, fresh, interesting, and exciting, which is what you want to have in your body of work. Again, yes, you're showing some water here. I think probably your composition in this photograph is certainly well done with the line that takes our eye all the way through the photo to the people. But I don't know how exciting this image is. And again, did you need to spend 10 hours volunteering with the riverkeeper to come up with this image? It's tough for me to say that the answer to that question is yes, because it just, again, feels like a very common vantage point that doesn't have a lot that's new and interesting and fresh for the viewer to embrace. So, like this shot, would like it a little bit better, I think, if it was in a little bit sharper focus. Looks like you're a little bit out of focus here. Maybe some camera shake going on. So you're at about an 85th of a second. So, there could be a little bit of camera shake going on, but, hopefully you can see that all of this right here is not in sharp focus. That's out of focus. And while I like the scene, I think it has a little bit more visual impact and says a little bit more about what's going on with the waterway here. The fact that it's out of focus, uh, kind of brings it down a notch. And then I'm not sure whether this was supposed to be your closing image. It was the last image. You definitely want to close on a high note rather than closing on a low note. And if you're doing a landscape photography for your final project, I really want to emphasize almost all your horizons are tilted. Another image where your horizon is tilted. So if you can see, now our horizon is leveled in this photograph rather than tilted. So little note to keep an eye on. So Andrew, a lot of work to do for your final project. You got to step up your game here a little bit as you move forward. Certainly some images that were composed beautifully and were good landscape images, but I think there's more that you can do, and I just want you to really begin to invest a good amount of time in your final project and recognize that it's something that is going to take a little bit of work to pull off a body of work that's going to be new, fresh, and exciting for the viewer. So I look forward to seeing that final project and wish you good luck on your photography for the next month or so as we finish things up. So next up we have Judi's work, and Judi worked with Cornerstone, which is a shelter for women. And Judi, I know, kind of faces the problem that we probably all had to encounter in our projects, in that you're really working with a population of people that there is a certain level of sensitivity to, that taking photographs of them may not necessarily be something that they want or are comfortable with. So I certainly understand your approach to not getting images of people and instead focusing in on the buildings around it and just development in the city as a whole. So and I'm not necessarily sure this is the order that you intended them to go in, but I'm just going to do them in the order they were downloaded in, simply because you don't have any numbers on them. But first shot here, lots of color, lots of bright and vibrant color, speaks to sort of this place almost coming alive, coming into fruition, coming into reality. Again, I keep saying about color tends to have a feeling of coming to life. Think about how when the landscape in the winter is pretty much all black and white and everything seems kind of dead, and then when the spring brings the grass turning green, everything turns to color. So that's coming alive. So certainly in this instance, that introduction of color into the project has that feeling of bringing it to life, that it not only is a drawing, but is something that is going to really happen. So I like that. Again, a good starting shot, or even a good filler shot for the group of images. Another image, and just taking a look at your shots, they do seem like they're a little bit small. So I'd prefer that your resolution is 300 dpi. So 5:7, 300 dpi. You're like 5:8. So this is why we're seeing a lot of pixelization in these images. So I like the appearance of all these different architectural details in the imagery. I guess the one thing that just has me wondering is, what is this place? Why did you photograph this place? Is there some context that you can bring to it other than the address? Is this one of the buildings that is used for Cornerstone, or is it just another redeveloped building in that area? I guess my mistake here, that you do have this title on it. This is Cornerstone, so certainly that helps. The one thing maybe I would suggest here is that you're kind of dead centered on the sign here. I almost wonder if it becomes a little bit more interesting if we start to lower it in the frame, something like that. Again, just trying to move away from putting things in the middle, putting things, where they would seem obvious to go. Try to be a little creative and move your subjects around. And then we've got a street sign from the area. I kind of love the lighting that's going on here, this deep shadow. Almost wonder if focusing in on the deep shadow would be a little bit more interesting. So again, moving this frame over sort of, maybe like that, rather than having this in the background that seems to be kind of empty and doesn't really add to things. Again, the choice that I've talked about a lot with everybody, going to black and white from color, I don't think it works here. I liked the color stuff. I think your colors are very bright and vivid, and this sort of brings the whole series down. It becomes very melancholy, dark, gloomy, moody. So I'm not necessarily sure that's the tone that you want to set in things. From your artist statement, it certainly sounds like this was an uplifting experience for you. And when we go to black and white, if it's not really poppy, then it tends to be very somber and melancholic. And then some food shots. A nice setup of your food. Again, your images are not resized properly, so we're not seeing the details in the surface of the food that we would like. And I also kind of feel like we're drifting off of the storyline a little bit here. Is this food that's being served? Is this food that you made? It just, like, I don't feel like there's any real context in it. And then the composition is just so sloppy here. We've got this bag. Do we really need to put the bag in there? And then it's kind of chopped at the side here. Do we include that or do we exclude it? It's starting to give me a little bit of concern here. As a food shot, I think this is a little bit stronger. The repeating patterns in the kernels of corn certainly helps. But again, sort of drifting off of that exterior story. I don't know whether this really fits in. I guess you're trying to talk about a day in the life at this place, but it kind of just feels like a food image, and one that probably isn't perfectly technically executed here. So the light's a little off. Seems like it's got a pretty strong yellow cast in it, so white balance wasn't perfect on there. So again, something that I think I'd like you to work on is creating a very concise and cohesive narrative as you move forward into your final project. Again, I like the idea of just sort of working around the development, the exterior of this area, how it's bringing to life, and perhaps, how it's affecting the residents of the area. Nice composition, beautiful lines here. I think I'd like to have something that my eye ultimately lands on here, whether it's maybe some construction workers or, a colorful truck or just something that my eye goes to. And then we've got, looks like you just gave me a concert poster. I don't know whether you actually did the images for this poster or whether it's something that you just wanted to show in there. But I do love what's going on in the background here with the crowd. I almost feel like this might have been the thing to focus in on there. Our problem here is she's so bright and the background so dark that it again kind of has that snapshot flash feel to it that isn't always so perfectly aesthetically pleasing. And then your brownfield cleanup, oh boy, I see where you're going, but it just feels like you're drifting farther and farther and farther away from Cornerstone. And I, I guess I just don't see the connection as intimately as I'd like to see that connection to this place. Um, I don't know how to push it any farther. I realize that you probably were dealing with people that didn't want to be photographed, but maybe photographing hands, photographing people out of focus, um, incorporating something in there. This just kind of again feels like you've sort of walked around the block and shot a bunch of signs for us, which is is not what I was looking for this project. I was hoping to through your service learning and the connections that you made, uh, I'll hope to have you photograph some of either the people in need or the people that are providing the people in need to show how these people have been helped. Here it just kind of feels like, okay, well, another political sign of political advertising showing us, what they're doing. It's so far away from that really, that mission of the cornerstone that I don't think it necessarily works all that terribly well. And then again, more construction shots. I kind of feel like I've said my piece on this, so I'm not going to beat a dead horse on it. But some solid shots here. I think technically speaking, though, you've got a few flaws that need to be straightened out for your final project. Make sure that you are submitting things at the right size so they don't look pixelated and blurry. And certainly, again, a mistake that a lot of you have made is shooting things from a very common vantage point. I think you need to start beginning to take images from a vantage point that isn't, eye level, shoulder height level. So get down low, get down high, try to explore some new angles that are going to provide a fresh perspective for a viewer on something that, pretty much everybody that drives by this spot sees this photograph. Show it to them in a different way, a new way, a unique way, and then your images then are really gonna excel. So keep that in mind as you push towards your final project, and keep challenging yourself to be creative. Thanks for your images. So last but not least, we have Emilie's images, and Emilie worked at Vive, and she opens up the series with kind of a still life image here, with all of these drawings up on the chalkboard here. They look like little kids' drawings, so we can almost imagine these spaces being filled by children who are laughing and playing and just sort of having a great time here. So I really love it from that perspective. I guess after having looked at the whole project itself and then coming back to this, I think the one sense that I get from this image is it feels a little bit empty, as if almost the place has been abandoned. And I think having these empty chairs in here really does that. So I'm almost wondering if the move would have been to just focus in on the chalkboard, even though I feel like these chairs almost, in some ways, make the photograph. I mean, compositionally, I think that's a beautiful photograph, really well resolved, but we also have to consider what's the message or what's the narrative that your images are conveying. And the narrative that I get here is kind of Vive is an empty and abandoned place, which, in reality, it certainly is very much far from that. So you got to kind of keep that in mind as you create your images. I love the detail shot of the floor. I think this is something that every good photo essay needs, sort of these abstract detail shots that tell a story. And certainly the weathered wood speaks a lot to the people that have kind of passed through this place. And I love the fact that there's sort of a metaphor going on here. Almost this line is kind of like a border, and almost I feel like as you visually enter this picture, you go from a darker area and transition to a brighter area. And I think it certainly has a metaphor for the people that go there, transitioning from harder lives to perhaps a better future in their new home. So I like this shot a lot. I think this is a very powerful image. Then over to this image, I love the fact that you've got some people in this shot. This is what your project needs more of. More people in the images, less of a feeling of emptiness. Although in some sense, I like it because here there is that sense of, even though you're in this place, there's also a certain level of isolation that comes with it, whether that's due to language barriers or just cultural barriers or whatever the case is. So beautifully composed image, Emilie. Really like how you set up all your frames. They're very easy to look at. Our eye works into them very nicely, and there's always kind of like that aha thing in a photograph that we can look at. So great shot. Love this. One of my favorites of the series for sure. Another neat shot, again, showing some of the details, some of the textures, the flags of all the different countries of the people that come and go or pass through this place. And I love it juxtaposed against the radiator, which, for me has certain metaphorical quality in that it's warm, and there's a warmth to this feeling of home that the people in this place are trying to create for those that come here. So this comes back to, and this is really when I was looking at the series earlier, I started getting that sense of emptiness. This photograph feels really empty to me, and especially the sandals or flip-flops underneath the table. They almost feel like they've been lost and kind of have fallen away or disappeared, and the owner has almost abandoned them. So you just really got to watch out with stuff like this when you have so many empty things, empty chairs, empty frames, and empty stuff. It starts to give that feeling of desolation and abandonment. So I would just be cautious on that. That being said, again, another beautifully set up image. I love the way you mirror these chairs and sort of have this perfectly straight line up at the top, and even, I'm sorry, in the area that we call the rule of thirds, you've got the Vive written on the table here. So great shot compositionally. I think it works really well. Just here's where we started to notice that, boy, a lot of these images have that feeling of emptiness to them. Love this picture, the interplay between geometric shapes here, the squares, the very formal nature of it, a lot of negative space here. All is great, and certainly the person in the photograph with the flag, makes that the spot that our eye goes to. I guess the only concern I would have here is that you're almost using somebody else's art and claiming it for your own. I'll throw an obscure reference to you guys, but Richard Prince, who is a contemporary artist that basically uses other people's photographs and puts his name on them and claims authorship to them. I know you're not really doing that here, but it's sort of sort of heading in that direction, in that the somebody else's art really becomes the major focal point of your art. So, while again, your stuff is just really, really beautifully composed, wonderfully set up. I just would caution you a little bit on including photographs, and especially including photographs and making them such the star of the show, so to say, in this photograph. Another shot that I just really love down this long hallway. I think it's has a lot of character to it, with the weathered wood and the beautiful long lines that lead our eye down here. I think I would just maybe wait until this woman took another step forward, so she just got a little bit farther in the frame. But gosh, that's really a minor point. Again, another really good shot, and I think hopefully you're also seeing here, having the people in here gives it a little bit more life than having it sort of empty and abandoned. So, and then finishing up on this one, again, I get what you're doing here with the pictures, kind of showing the history of the place, that it sort of has a legacy. But for me, I look at these images and say, well, I kind of want your photographs to be like this photograph. That's a great photograph. That's a wonderful shot. This is a beautiful image. That is just doesn't have that human element that the three images do up above, that make them so wonderful. So, I again recognize that you are facing, a problem that pretty much everybody was facing about, photographing people that, may not want to be photographed. So I do understand that, but also just really caution you about using other people's art and sort of claiming it as your own here, which I kind of feel like this image, even more so than the other one, really does that. So Emilie, I really look forward to your final project. I think, compositionally and setting up your frame and technically speaking, you are all the way there. You're where you need to be. Now it's just sort of developing a little bit stronger narrative and getting, your feet a little bit dirtier, so to speak, and getting a little bit more involved in the subject matter that you're photographing. Okay, so good job here, though. Really enjoyed seeing these images. Definitely one of my favorite groups of shots amongst the group. So good luck on your final project, and look forward to seeing it.